All right, so let's get into this. Choose church. You ready, guys? Ready to check this one off? Take out your little check mark makers here, your hand. I want to see everybody's hands up in the air. Here we go. And did you choose church today? Yes, give yourself a big check mark. You did it. It's on the list. It's crossed off the list. You did it, right? That's a good thing. It's really great to be church with each other. It's really great to choose church. Well, what does it mean to choose church? And I know that many of you, the people I see here today and the people I've seen that are worshiping online as well, the stories of your lives that I know you've had to, at one moment in time, or maybe a few, you've had to make a choice as to if you're going to be a part of church or not. And there are a lot of obstacles that you've had to overcome to do that. For some of you, you've been going to church since you were tiny, since you were a little child, right? And it just becomes part of who you are. It's what you do on the weekends. It's the people that you're a part of. It's just how it works. For many others of us, it's not a natural thing. It's not something we were brought up with. So why is it important? What is it all about? And why would we choose it? That's what we're going to dig in today. The best part is we get to see how Jesus does this, so we get to see really what he is all about. All right, so you ready? Sometimes you'll hear people say, there is no church in the Bible. And in a sense, that's somewhat true. There's not necessarily a church you'd think of in the same way you do today. But in most other senses, it's not really true. One of my favorite theologians, N.T. Wright, when I got to hear him speak one time, he made this somebody asked a really eloquent question. It was very insightful, and it was really awesome. And he said, so Dr. Wright, what do you think? And he stood up, he thought a moment, he said, well, yes, but mostly no. And I love that phrase because you want to affirm what the person is saying, and then there's a little bit of truth to it, but the substance that underlies it is completely false. The same thing goes with talking about, well, Jesus didn't really go to church. There was no church in the Bible. It's not really true. Because at all times in the history of humanity, the history of God's relationship with his people, he has called people to come together in groups, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, with all kinds of different people, to worship him. And the word that's used in the New Testament is this word that's at the bottom of the screen here. Do you see this? Ecclesia. There's a few different ways to pronounce it. We're just going to say ecclesia, all right? It's a Greek word that when it's used in non-biblical texts, like other ancient Greek writings, it just means an assembly of people that have gathered together for a purpose. That's what it's all about. It's about a group of people who come together for a specific purpose. And when Jesus uses this word ecclesia, when Paul uses the word ecclesia, what do you think he's talking about? He's talking about getting people together, people who have this identity, this role to play, for a purpose that is bigger than themselves. And I gotta say, to me, this is the definition of church. You may think of church as, this is just a thing I have to do. A church is a building, right? A church is like a denomination, like the Roman Catholic Church or the Lutheran Church. That's what church is. But in its base form, in its really substantive meaning, it's a group of people who have a role to play for a purpose that's greater than themselves. Is that how you feel about church? Because if you're not there yet, I hope that by the time we're done talking here in about you got 5 minutes to get there, 10 minutes maybe, we'll see. But I hope that you move a little closer to that, because that's the power of church. That's the power of what Jesus was trying to instill in his disciples. That's the power of the Spirit's work with us and through us now, is that we are gathered together with each individual roles to play that together accomplishes an incredible purpose. And the best part is it's not our purpose. It's God's purpose. We get to work together with the ways he has blessed us to do his things right here, right now. All right, so when people ask you, what is church? What is church all about? Why should I care about church? You can go back to this base definition. You're like, it's just a group of people who are all important, who have all a role to play for a very specific purpose. And for church, that purpose is bringing God's kingdom right here on earth as it is in heaven. That's what it's all about. All right, we see this in Matthew chapter 16 when Jesus says this to Peter. You may have heard this before. He says, and I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. Peter had just said, Lord, I believe in you. You are the Messiah. You are the one who God has sent to save the entire world. And Jesus says, that is fantastic. I love it. You're getting it. And Peter, whose name means Cephas, which means small rock, which this is a play on words. It's kind of interesting saying, on this rock, on Peter, he's going to build his ecclesia. He's going to build his group of people gathered for God's purpose. And what do we see? Wait. Who gathers it? Who's going to build it? Jesus is building it. Right? So right away, he takes the onus off of Peter. Say, Peter, you got to figure out how to build this thing. No, he doesn't even say that. He's saying, I'm going to build it with you, for you, through you. I got this. And whose church is it? It's not Pastor John's church. It's not Audrey's church. It's not even your church. It's Jesus' church. Audrey, are you saying, no, I don't want this?
No, I just said thank the Lord.
You said thank the Lord. That's right. Because it's not about us. Everything that we do, all of who we are and all of what we're doing is about him. And then he says this fascinating thing. This is coming from Jesus means this has some weight to it, right? And the gates of Hades, of hell, will not prevail over this church. This is the promise that Jesus gives each and every one of us. That as we gather together, using our gifts and skills for the good of God's kingdom, right here, right now, nothing can stop it. Not the worst evils, not the most confusing times, not the most fear you've ever experienced. Nothing will overcome the power of God working through you, working through us. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a promise you can stand on. That's part of a foundation that you can build on no matter what is going on in your world. And I got to tell you, this week has been really tough. I've received text messages and phone calls from numerous people that we all know together where their lives are just crumbling. Their lives, it's really, really hard. I think I turned to Aaron at one point this week. I was like, I got to turn my phone off because if I get one more text from somebody, I'm going to lose it. And it's not me. It's us. It's hard. Life is difficult right now. Life is really hard for many of us. No matter what, together, as God's people, working for his purposes, together as church, nothing will overcome that. That's where hope is. Yeah? That's where hope is. That's where the power is. It's in the promise of God for us today. And we only get that through church. Through this weird thing that God has set before us. This group of people put together for his purpose. It's incredible. Question. What do we mean by choosing church? Well, this is exactly what we were saying before, right? It means when you're choosing to be a part of church, you're choosing to commit with God's people for his purpose. So I've heard horror stories from friends who are pastors in all kinds of different places, and they tell me how they've got to have a really difficult meeting with a really difficult member who is trying to derail the church in a certain direction, who's trying to take over the purpose of this group of people to meet their own needs. And those conversations are hard because sometimes we can think that this is our place. This is our people. And especially if you're in a leadership role, the temptation is to take that power and use it for yourself. Everybody has that temptation. But when we remember what church is all about, we remember that we are committing with other people, not for our own good or for our own purposes or for what we can get out of it, but for God's purposes and what he is going to do through us. So this is the thing. I often hear people say, well, church has to be about its members. Church has to be about the people that donate every week, the people that show up, the people who give up their time, talents, and treasures. That's what church should be about. We need to provide things for them. And the answer is yes, but mostly no. Why do I say that? That seems strange, right? That's different than every other business, right? You have a business built on membership, you take care of your members. This is different. Because we are here gathered together not to produce a new thingamabob. Like, that's not what we do. Or a new service. We are here to bring God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. To share peace and hope and love in places that don't get to experience. To give people forgiveness that don't deserve it. To raise up our families and our friends and our neighborhoods in the way of the Lord so that things will go well. That's what we're here for. The purpose is key. And the reason why I say it's not about us, or it's not about focusing on us, is because when we together focus on those outside of ourselves, what happens to us internally? What happens as the byproduct of all of that? We grow in patience and goodness and kindness and love and joy and peace. That happens as we look outside of ourselves, as we look to serve and seek the lost, as Jesus has done. We in turn grow without even necessarily trying or thinking or focusing on it. It happens. God works that through us. So we together, we commit to one another to go along this journey with each other for God's purpose, to bring his hope to more and more people each and every year. Are we good? Does that make sense? All right, if you are at home and you were able to comment and talk along, feel free to add a question or two. We'll see if we can get those in by the end as well. I know there are a lot of questions about what this is all about. We'll try to address them as we go. Next thing. In the book, Zach talks about a couple of things, a couple ways to look at choosing church and how it's important in our lives. The first one is the power of consistency. So, choosing church means to be part of a group of people, working for God's purposes. Can I do that and not come to church on a weekend? Yes, but mostly no. Yes, but mostly no. Why do we say that? Because it's just like every other area of your life. You may do something really well once, but if you don't keep it up, if you don't practice it, you may be natural at playing the piano. You just sit down, it makes sense to you. You can play a couple chords, you can mimic a song, but if you do not practice it and come back to it and back to it, you will only be able to do that one thing forever. You will not grow in your understanding of how to play the piano, what it's all about. You will not grow in your joy in playing the piano. It'll just be a party trick. Church needs not to be a party trick in your life. The power of consistency is all about participating consistently with others for God's purpose. It's important. Why do we say this? Well, in Hebrews chapter 10, there's a whole paragraph, a whole episode here that is encouraging us to do this. Let us hold tightly without wavering. Without wavering. If you remember the last time you learned to do something physical, whether it was like lifting weights or swinging a baseball bat or throwing whatever it was, the first couple times you do it, what happens? What do your muscles do? Like if you're doing a squat, you're lifting a heavy weight. If you're doing some curls, right? We'll be real simple here. The first couple times you do it with heavy weight, what do your muscles do? Right? They don't work so well. They're all shaking, right? It doesn't go. Hold tight without wavering. If you are not wavering, that means you have done what? You have practiced. You have held consistently to this. The encouragement, let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope that we affirm, to practice in this hope. For God can be trusted to keep his promises. Remember, that's the whole foundation of what we were talking about earlier. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people already have. This already happened in the first century of Jesus' being raised from the dead and changing the whole world. Some people had already said, I don't need to be a part of this church anymore. I can do this on my own. I have access to God through Jesus. I can pray wherever I want. I can sing songs. I can write. I can worship God however I want, wherever I want on my own. And yet, God says through Scripture, don't neglect being part of church. It does more for you than you can even imagine. It's practice to help you never waver in the hope that you have in Jesus when you need it most. The final thing that Zach talks about is this: the importance of good news. He makes a big claim in this book, and I'm going to make it today as well. I think I've already made it twice. It is very difficult to grow in your relationship with God, to learn more about who Jesus is, to understand what he has done in your life, what he is doing in your life, what he has planned for you, if you do not gather with others through church. You just can't do it. You can't grow. You can't learn. You can't be encouraged. You need a community. I don't care if you're introverted or extroverted or on one end of the spectrum. I don't care. You need other people to be around. You need other people to encourage you. This is why we do what we do, because when we get together to encourage one another, what do we share with each other? If things are working well, if they're working the way they're supposed to, we share good news with each other. The good news of Jesus crucified for us, raised from the dead, and gifted us new life to be lived today and into eternity. It's a hope that is certain and sure, that will never leave you no matter what is happening in your life. The importance of good news cannot be underestimated, and we only truly experience it together. When I used to be in Wisconsin, the joke by the pastors was always, people always tell me I can go out and hunt, because the guys would go out as soon as hunting season would open. Like all of a sudden there'd be half as many men in the congregation. It was crazy. And they'd go out for months and months or whatever. They wouldn't be at church forever. And the senior pastor there, he was very wise. He was an older guy, he was retiring, and he would tell me, John, the next time I hear somebody say this, that they can go out and worship in nature and just be out hunting and it's just as good as being at church, I can't help but ask them, when's the last time a fish jumped out of the water and told you that this is Christ's body given for you? This is Christ's blood given for you. The next time somebody tells me that happens, then I'll believe them. As far as I know, in his 40 years of ministry, that never happened. Fish just don't do that. Where do we get that? Where do we experience that tangible good news? It's right here together. It's so incredibly important. In Luke chapter 4, we see Jesus as well. This was his habit. Remember, this whole series is about Jesus' habits. It's not about what we've made up or anything else. It's what your Savior did so that we can emulate that, replicate that in our lives. When Jesus came to the village of Nazareth, his boyhood home, he went as usual to the synagogue. So he went to church as usual. What does that say to you? This was the custom, to gather together. And what did they do while they were there? Well, they got a very special sermon that day because Jesus himself opened up the scriptures and read to them. They gathered as usual together. They shared good news together. And in their presence that day, can you imagine? The good news was tangibly, literally in their presence. They could see him, they could touch him, they could hear his voice directly. Today, we hear that through Scripture. We hear that through one another's voice. We taste it, we see it in communion, we experience it in baptism and in our reminders for baptism. That's what it is all about. Today, we're so excited we get to celebrate a baptism with a family after church. I'm going to their house, we're going to do it right there. It's so incredible. It's one of the first ones we've had since all of this started. And I gotta tell you, it's one of my favorite things. Absolutely love it. But not only that, we had 2 babies born this week in our congregation on the same day. And not only that, we have kids coming in after church to do their new Bible readers class. We are still in the middle of all of our challenges, sharing the good news, bringing that into the presence of the lives of the people in our community. Because what are we? We're church, right? That's not stodgy, it's not old, it's not old-fashioned, it's not traditional, it's not for some other time period. It's for now. We are just people that God has called to work together for his purpose. And his purpose is to bring life to those around us. I hope that this week you can see how all of these things happen. How when you experience this good news together, you get to see how God has been faithful in your past, how he gives you power in your present, and how he brings hope for your future. In all of these things, the good news does this. This is for you. But it's not just for you, right? This is for the neighbor that you have who's struggling today. This This is for your friend who texted you saying that they had a bad test result this week. This is for the people you see that check you out at the grocery store who are worried about their health because they have to be around people all day. This is for the people who are worried and who don't want to get out of their house and they don't know what they're going to do all winter long because they're stuck inside their house. This is for all of those people around you. Faithfulness, power, hope from God Himself. And this is for you to share with them. This is church. This is ecclesia. This is us. This is Crosspoint. If you haven't had a chance to take some next steps, we'd encourage you to do that this week. The first one is simple. It's commit to church. Become a member. You don't get a card. It's not like the gym. There aren't membership fees like the gym. There aren't a list of special benefits that you get. It's just saying that you want to be a part of this community. When you do that, you add yourself to the many, many other families who are doing the same thing. You're saying, I'm in. I'm in with all of you together for this purpose here at Crosspoint while I'm here. That's what membership is all about. It's super easy. You literally just have to send me an email or a text or talk to me, and we chat. I answer all the questions that you have. That's all there is. No classes, no background checks, nothing like that. All right? Second thing is be consistent in worship. So you probably already are a member, or you come regularly all the time. You participate in different things. But maybe you worship with us once a month, or once every 6 months, or once every 2 weeks. There's a reason why I'm here every Sunday. It's because it's good for us to gather every single week. From the beginning of time, that's how we are made, to rest one day a week, to focus on God. What can you do in your life to work on being more consistent in worship? How can you maybe try, if it's been hard for you to come every week, try for the next 3 weeks. And for those of you who are at home, that doesn't mean coming here in person. That means logging on. It means going into Facebook or on our website, worshiping with us wherever you are. But try to do 3 weeks in a row. I guarantee you, you'll find value in that, and maybe at the end of the 3 weeks, you might just keep going. So that's the challenge for you. If that's been hard to worship regularly, do the next 3 weeks in a row. Finally, if you have done all of these things, but maybe you haven't found a place to use your gifts and skills yet, remember, we're all people who God is using to play a role within this bigger purpose. How can you help? How can you volunteer? There are so many ways. Things here specifically at Crosspoint to do while we're at church and that you can do at home, and things you can do in our community to bless our neighbors. But it takes getting over that obstacle to say, this is for me. I want to do this. This is how I'm going to choose to be a bigger part of church now. Choose your step. Choose your challenge for this week and take an action to take that next step. All right, so what is church, everybody? Church is a group of people called by God together to use their gifts and skills for His purposes. A group of people to play a role for the purposes of God's kingdom. It sounds simple, but it's life-changing. When we are all in this together, it is life-changing, not just for us, but for the world.